Thank you for tuning in to the Natty News Daily podcast. This episode is brought to you in part by our sponsor, Core Nutritionals. You can check out corenutritionals.com for all your supplement needs and use code Natty News Daily at checkout to save 20%. Enjoy the episode.
What's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of a Natty News Daily. We've got Mr. Eric Helms. I'm going to say the joke again because it's still funny. Eric Helms from the future. He's tomorrow recording on a Wednesday. We're recording on a Tuesday. And he's officially announced that he is competing again this year. And we're going to talk all about it. Welcome to the podcast, my man.
It's a pleasure here in New Zealand where I can tell you that the future is indeed bright because it is a day in advance. So, I'll make the joke 3 times as well.
Yeah,
I don't even care.
third time's the charm.
Yeah.
So before the internet screwed us up, we were just chatting about that 2019 was your last outing. So it's been a good chunk of time. And what has your kind of bodybuilding life looked like between 2019 to now?
Yeah, good question. So the immediately after my 2019 prep, I did a couple of Strongman events, which was fun. I did they're not full Strongman competitions because those are like 4 or 5 events and they like a meet, like a track meet almost. But I did do a stones competition, which was pretty cool, and truck pull, which is a combined event. And then I also did a kind of like the powerlifting equivalent of Strongman. They have like log press and then conventional deadlift, which was fun. And then I had like a little excursion into strength sport. So in 2020, unfortunately, COVID happened, of course, but my goal was to compete in 3 different strength sports in the year. And I managed to just eke that out around the lockdowns. But the whole time, of course, I'm still doing, it's not like you get smaller doing strongman or weightlifting or powerlifting. And I certainly kept up on my accessories and all that. My calves might have shrunk a little bit, but for the most part, I think I was doing a pretty good job.
That's the Omar influence.
Yeah, you hang out with that guy, and it just feels like you're doing something wrong when you train calves.
Yeah, Canadians, we screw everything up.
That's right. Maple syrup, no calves. It's just rough. But
it's a bad time.
But on the whole, I would say it was good. 2021 was my return to powerlifting. So I competed in a few meets there. And then for the latter half of 2021, unfortunately, New Zealand Nationals got canceled. So basically from July of 2021 until now, I've been almost exclusively training for bodybuilding. I'm really just focusing on what I think is going to be the best for my physique without any consideration for how strong I am. So I'm hopeful that I've put in enough time and work. I was mentioning, but 2019 only feels like a very small amount of time ago, even though it was 4 years. But I'm hopeful that the COVID time suck is only impacting my perception of time, not the actual ability to grow muscle.
Yeah.
So we shall see if this soon-to-be 40-year-old man can make progress.
Do you think that there was any like physique benefit to like doing what you did with the strongman and stuff like that? Because I know like maybe just in that kind of the people that I speak with, it's almost like a fear of leaving bodybuilding during the off season for like you said, like just you're going to lose all your bodybuilding muscle, for lack of a better term. Do you think there's like maybe some merit to like switching it up from time to time, doing what you did?
I think ultimately kind of the discussion around optimal is interesting, but I think it gets away from the reality of what is someone going to do. So the way I view it, and for anyone who's familiar with kind of my like the training principles I promote, like adherence is the base of everything, right? Yeah. So for me, after a long bodybuilding prep and being extremely focused on the way I look, knowing that you have to look worse before you look better again. Like nobody likes to be like going from shredded to then, a healthy recovery diet and getting like 10% over stage weight. Mm-hmm. And you're also a lot weaker, but you have this opportunity to regain some strength and try some new things. I found that it was a lot better mentally for me to switch gears a little bit, de-emphasize the bodybuilding training and being like, hey, what's the most I can lift on a stone? What's the most I can press on a log? I've never done this before. So I had this opportunity while my body and my mind is in a state where even if I did everything perfectly and optimally on paper with bodybuilding, I would be feeling worse and I wouldn't be as motivated. And I have to like kind of talk myself into training. Mm-hmm. And I think the end result from like a holistic perspective is kind of having that shift in gears. And we've done this for the longest time with 3DMJ, off-season powerlifting,
Yeah.
in-season competitive bodybuilding. And we've softened that stance a little bit, of course, and, thought about it more from the perspective, okay, are you a bodybuilder first and then a powerlifter in the off season? Then here's some things we can have in your training. But I think from a mental standpoint, it can be really helpful. Not for everybody, but certainly for me, it's been very helpful to keep me focused and motivated. I hit new PR totals in powerlifting in 2021, hit new deadlift, squat, and bench PR, and I think that was really something motivating for me that kept me consistent and training hard. Not that I never missed training, but I think there is something to be said for having that kind of motivation in training, that even if, let's say the training is 80% of quote unquote optimal, but you're putting forth 100% effort into it more consistently, I think that's going to result in something better than if you flip those two numbers.
Yeah, that's a good soundbite right there, because I think a lot of people get into like this, especially deep into the off season, this like funk almost, because there's no, like you said, you've regressed from like looking unreal, but you're nowhere near the sight of like the shows coming up, and you're just in this lull of like the monotonous. I've experienced that over the years, of this monotonous like bodybuilding chipping away, but that enjoyment starts to dip, your adherence starts to dip, and then it's like, oh, this is now not getting fun. Like I don't
See,
like
I love it. I love it.
For sure, right? And that's something that is very individual to people, right? But like even with clients that I've had that are, a year and a half in the off season, they're not competing till fall 2024. And they're like, man, there's some days. And I'm like, I get it, right? And maybe that's an opportunity to try something new and sprinkle it in here and there. Maybe it's not all completely strongman, but maybe 1 or 2 days we can add in some 3 to 5s powerlifting stuff, right? And play around with some different things.
Leroy, at the very least, for when I have clients who are not at all interested in doing powerlifting or those movements or anything like that, and they just love the bodybuilding experience, it's a great opportunity to de-emphasize what you look like in the mirror instead of emphasizing the logbook. I think that is something that can apply to people who have a very different relationship to lifting than I do, because I'm probably equal parts strength athlete that I am bodybuilder, and that's just who I've always been. People sometimes see me as a bodybuilder, but the actual first thing I ever did competitively was a powerlifting meet in 06, and then I did my first bodybuilding season in 07, and I've never not done both. There's only been a few years I haven't competed in something. So I recognize that I'm not necessarily the typical bodybuilder, but I've worked with tons of the typical bodybuilder, and this same message can be there in a lot of ways. And sometimes it can just be like, look, mentally or emotionally, the contest prep blues are hitting me. And sure, I can focus on my training, and that's a more productive way of actually seeing progress and staying motivated. But I also need to just maybe take my mind off of competitive bodybuilding for a bit and kind of, get a little more of a happiness portfolio that's diversified, have friends, do things instead of just thinking about, I have higher macros now. Isn't that great? It's like, that should not be the central piece of your life. That's terrible,
Yeah, for sure. No, and that's also the coach in you coming out, right? We were going to try to keep you in that athlete portal, but
sorry.
I
mean, just fucking go hard, bro.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's an important thing to talk about, right? Because it can sometimes be the difference maker of someone like crapping on like never bodybuilding again because they just get in that funk and they're like, this isn't for me. And it's like, well, maybe you just need to switch it up. It's not for you right now.
Yes.
But, right. Giving the that adjustment, right? We could have lost some good athletes to that over the years if they didn't maybe take that moment.
Well said, Leroy. And I think, I used to be very, very, because I have a kind of a scientific tilt, and I don't think this is just a scientist thing. I think it's also like the athlete mentality of like, I'll do whatever it takes to get to my goals, and who cares about enjoyability? Who cares about adherence? I'm here for what's physiologically optimal, or whatever. Maybe you don't have kind of like the evidence-based perspective, and you're like, whatever the pros or my coach think is best, I'm down to do it because I'm hungry for my gains, And I think that perspective is fine until it's not. And I can tell you, as someone who's been, lifting for almost 20 years now, and is now in my 5th competitive season, and I've coached hundreds of competitive bodybuilders, like it eventually comes. There's going to be a time period where your relationship with the sport is not great. And there are more people who burn out of bodybuilding then take it as far as they can, hit their potential, and go, well, I did what
Yeah.
I could. I'm going to decide to stop now because I can't take it further. And like if we were to go, okay, what are all the reasons people don't get into peak shape and maximize their potential within a season? So now we're stepping back from a career and we're just talking about like an individual season. Most of the time people think, oh, they didn't diet hard enough, or they didn't stick to their diet, or they dieted 12 weeks, not 20, or all these reasons of maybe why they weren't in peak shape. But I can tell you, if we include all the people who never even made it to stage as not being in peak shape, because obviously they're not, now you see that it's actually like 60, maybe 50 or 60% of people who don't get into peak shape because they just stop.
Yeah.
So if you make it on stage at all, you're within, the upper 40 percentile.
Yeah.
And then now we're debating, the minority of people of what does it take to get shredded. But if the biggest thing that stands in most bodybuilders' way is just the overall process can lead to burnout, then you have to correct that first and admit and acknowledge the fact that you are human and a bodybuilder. So yeah.
Love that. That's huge, actually.
Yeah.
Leroy, do you mind staying on this training topic for a little bit, or did you have other topics? I have a couple questions.
You first,
good?
then his.
Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of spinning off the last question, right? So Leroy asked, do you think that those strength sports took away from your bodybuilding? Do you feel, because I know you're training at home, you have a pretty good setup, right? Like it's not like you're just using adjustable dumbbells and a cheapo adjustable bench. You've got the cable setup, you've got the leg press hack combo. Do you feel like training at home with the equipment you have, even if it is somewhat robust, are there weak points that maybe you've had to train around because of that? Or do you feel like there's like physique areas that are not trained as adequately as they could be because of the setup?
I gotta admit, I'm a very fortunate guy at this stage in my career, and we bought our home in 2020. And this is a brief tangent, and I promise I'll answer your question more directly. So, my wife and I have our ideas of what needs to be a home that is good, right? And she wants to see a good kitchen and all that stuff, and I care about those things. But what I did each time is I walked into the garage.
I feel like this is going to be so eerily similar. Even 2020. This is continue. I know exactly how the story ends because I'm living it too.
So I walk in the garage and I see, can I touch the ceiling? And if the answer is yes, it's a no, because then I know the plates when I do an overhead press are going to hit the ceiling, right? And especially if I'm standing on the platform that I plan to buy. So our garage was just barely perfect, and then what we did is we took out the drywall ceiling and just had the rafters, so I could press between the drywall rafters on a platform. So by the time I had completed my home gym setup, like you said, right now I have a combo hack squat leg press. I have a dual cable stack, which I think people don't even fully know. Even those at the home gym, all the things you can do with it if you're creative. I have
my most used piece is my free motion.
Right? Yeah, you can do so much on cables. They're essentially almost any machine you can think of if you're creative, with just a few other pieces of kit, right? And that is actually convertible into a squat rack, and it has a dip attachment, a pull-up attachment. You can sit there and do rows, whole 9 yards. So I have the ability to do most isolation movements you could think of. Calf raises with the dip belt on the bottom position. That's one people get surprised by. Standing single leg extensions with a cuff, or single leg curls with a cuff. I've got a Helico squat combo rack. It's basically somebody imitated the Helico design. It's not actually Helico. It's way too expensive. And then I've got a couple of adjustable dumbbells, one that goes up to 40 kilos or 88 pounds for the Americans. So I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything at this point. But I think there are a lot of people who have home gym setups who do have to make some concessions. And I'd be more than happy to talk about that if it's useful to the listener. But in my specific situation, I think because of that, the hack squat leg press combo and the cables, I'm pretty much training at a commercial gym.
I did send you over something, a seated leg curl to add into your arsenal.
Oh, really?
With the cable, which both of these guys do too now.
I used that for quite some time before I got my machine. Yeah. Dan's quite the meathead engineer for sure of the group.
Okay, that's really creative. I'll have to. Did you hit me up on DM on Instagram?
Yeah, I sent you a DM.
I'm gonna check that out. You might see that in my next vlog if I can figure out how to rig it up.
There we go.
Right on. Okay, let's move out to prep now. Have you determined / announced shows yet?
Yeah, I have. And as you guys know, like some of the shows later in the year, they don't get announced until like end of first quarter often. And we're actually at that point. So some of the announcements that I made in my first vlog, which was a couple weeks ago now, last week, I don't know. Time is
I think
strange.
last week.
Last week, thank you.
That damn
with
time
a-
warp again. Jeez.
Exactly. It was a little ambiguous, but I basically said, hey, from September to November. So right now it is looking like, and this one hasn't been announced, but based upon its timing last year, the WNBF New Zealand just started up. I actually had the pleasure and privilege at judging at its inaugural event. So this year I'm obviously going to be on the other side of the judging table. They wouldn't let me both judge and compete. I don't see the conflict. I'm an honest guy. No, just kidding. But
No,
so I'm planning
I
on
don't see the
competing in
problem.
that. I don't either, right? That is probably going to be towards the end of September. So that most likely will be my first show. If that changes, that as well could change. And then I have the Battle of the Bay, which is in the California Bay Area, which is where I'm actually from originally, where I used to live before I came to New Zealand, which is, I think, October 14th, if I recall correctly. Or maybe the 7th. I could be getting the dates wrong, but it's
Have you competed
mid-October.
at that show? I know Jeff has.
I haven't. I've coached athletes at that show.
Okay.
And I've been to that show, but I haven't actually competed in it before. But it's a real good show. It's probably the second biggest amateur show in California besides the Muscle Mayhem. To do a good job. So I plan on doing that.
When is it October? What date? Or right around?
You know what? I don't know why I'm guessing, because we have the internet. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. It's a pretty good tool. But it's going to
I'm
need all the
thinking
support.
selfishly for
It's
myself.
hit and miss here in Canada, the internet thing, you know.
I saw that. We were on round 2. Let me see.
Don't jinx us now, Leroy.
All right, let's
We're
see
too
what we
deep now.
got here. Battle of the Bay, October 7th. Yeah, so that'll be October 7th.
Might be the same day, Mr. America. So okay, yeah,
I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
That's too big.
that's I'm thinking for me, like I said, selfishly. So
So I'll be doing Battle of the Bay on October 7th. Jeff Alberts, he lives pretty close there, just in Stockton. So the plan is stay with him, and then the next weekend we plan to drive up to Washington. There's going to be a WNBF Pro-Am there. So depending upon how the last 2 shows went, I could be in either division, and either on the same stage at different times as Jeff, or getting my ass whooped by Jeff at the same time in the same stage, because we'll probably both be middleweights. Well, you never know how big the pro shows are, right? It could be one lineup. You never know.
Yeah.
So that'll be really cool. So that's my third show is October 14th, the Washington Pro-Am. And then the fourth show is going to be the last weekend in October, and that's WNBF Australia, which is it's the new WNBF Australia affiliate, and they're putting that on in Brisbane. And I have some colleagues in Brisbane. Shout out to Alex Thomas and Sports Nutrition Australia. So I'd probably compete there. And then the last show of the year would be back to Washington, I should say, in Seattle for WNBF Worlds. And I'll compete hopefully as an amateur. Hopefully as a pro, if I was able to get that pro card. Not that that's by any means a trivial task, but or hopefully if I don't get my pro card, but I am able to do decently well as an amateur, qualify as an amateur, and then try for it with that one last shot, you know?
awesome. I have a couple questions.
It's
obviously, go ahead.
No, you go.
It's obviously February, and you've laid out pretty much your whole season. Is that historically how you've usually done it, laid out the whole season, versus like maybe target one show and maybe I'll flex? And then have you always done fall seasons? That's my second question.
No. So very first season, 07, I had planned to just do like the big 3 amateur shows that were in the like general Sacramento area and also the Bay Area. And basically what happened is I made it to the first show and I was like, I'm dying. This is terrible. And I just did one more show the next weekend, which is an NPC show, just because it was another week and I couldn't make it any further. And then I just watched Berto compete at the June NGA show and then the July Muscle Mayhem. Or he might not even done that year. Anyway, so I just called Uncle my first season and then got really fat. So that was the plan for 07, which wasn't really a plan. It's just kind of things happen first season.
Yeah.
09, I basically said, look, I'm going to try to get all the shows in. And I competed in April, May, June, July, August, and September. The only problem is that I wasn't really that familiar with my body or what I needed to do to get shredded. So I was really only in peak shape for August and September. That was my first time I actually got pretty peeled. and I did pretty well. I lost to the eventual overall winner in the last show I did, placed second out of 5 in the WNBF Pro Qualifier. Took some time off in 2011. I planned out to compete starting in July, and I would just take it to the end of the season. Wasn't quite in shape for July, so I pushed it back to August, and I actually won an INBA show and just tapped out immediately. And I was like, I'm good, sweet. I got the yeah. And in reflection, I was still quite fatigued from 09. And there's a little more to it than just the message to the listener of, hey, don't compete just every other year. It's too frequent. I had a lot of personal stuff going on. My father had just passed away in 09, and I don't think I'd really properly dealt with it yet. So some of that fatigue that was carrying over was outside of the competitive aspect of bodybuilding. So then after 2011, I took like 8 years off to do a PhD, and I came back in 2019. In 2019, I had to be much more diligent and plan out things because, and much like I have this year, because New Zealand is really far. And at the time, we didn't have a WNBF affiliate. So I'm like, all right, when in the year can I travel to the States and compete? And I lined up a couple shows in Sacramento, the River City, which was the week before, or 2 weeks before the Mayhem. And then I did one show in New Zealand that was a natural IFBB amateur show in October to end the season. And then I also did in April, I did an early show when I wasn't quite in peak condition in Hawaii, which is pretty close to New Zealand. So that I planned out pretty well in advance. And knowing that I was going to try to compete in April, and based on my history of how long it takes me to get shredded, I actually did like a pre-diet. So I started prep in mid-December 2018 at around 89, 90 kilos. So just like 197, 199, knowing that my stage weight is a little under 180 or 80 kilos. So that's how I planned that season out. And I noticed that around August, where I had been basically shredded from May, like that was the final push to get a little leaner than that warm-up show, all the way through August, I was starting to fall apart a little bit. My peak went weird in August. Like I had like I was eating up into the show. I'd been eating up for months, and I just had like a little packet of sushi, and I didn't really even put much in the way of sodium on it in terms of soy sauce. And I started to have bloated ankles, like the edema that you sometimes see. And I'm like, okay, my body's just displeased with the decisions I'm making.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, I know my window of when do I start to have decrements to still dieting. So this time I was like, I really want to do worlds. So when do I need to start, and what's the lightest or heaviest I can be from when I start and get to worlds if I've got roughly an 8-month dieting window, 9-month dieting window before I'm going to start. If I'm not mentally saying I can't handle this, physically my body will start to say nah. And that's what was the decision to do these fall shows. So I haven't actually done any competition after September or August previously. So this would be a first.
Sweet.
Do you think that 8 to 9 month dieting window is specific to you, or have you seen that kind of repeat itself across a bunch of athletes?
I think I mean, there are going to be individual determinants to that, but I do think that it has to. So, okay, I think the main factors are experience and how hard did you have to work to get there? How much total weight did you lose? Where's your natural kind of lower intervention point? And then psychologically, how did you experience the whole process, which I think can directly impact the outcomes. But most of the time, I would say that for experienced competitors seems to be the point where, so yes, so it's generalizable to some degree, inexperienced competitors. Another thing to consider is how long of that period are you shredded? So I think that is something to be said as well. And 2 to 4 months of actually being shredded, that's kind of on average where I've seen things start to just kind of spiral the drain at that point. Yeah. But interestingly enough, in the early phase, it's actually better. So it's not like you start in that 2 to 4 month window and it's just kind of like it's only going to get worse and you notice it at the 2 to 4 month mark. It's like initially you're eating up and you're like, oh, this is great. I was dieting and shredded, and now I'm not dieting, but I'm shredded. And then it starts to get bad again. So you've kind of got this window where you're eating up and where I think things actually go better. And you're like, this is great. I'm eating maintenance calories and I'm walking around shredded, and every day I look like I'm peaked. This feels better than dieting. But then eventually, like, you realize, like, but I don't feel good. Like, so yeah.
You're just used to this subtle hell all day.
Yeah, you've moved from the 9th level of hell to like purgatory, and then eventually you slip down to the 1st level of hell, and then you're like, I'm out of here. So
I'm gonna selfishly throw this out there that we are running a show on September 9th.
really,
WMBF Ontario's inaugural event, and consider this a special invite to you, Mr. Helms.
I will 100% consider that, because one of the things I was talking to Berto about is, hey, if I think this will be how long it takes me to get ready, here's a nice one close to home. My travel schedule is kind of wacky this year, regardless of my competition season. So no guarantees, but it will certainly be on my radar. I was actually looking at like Singapore, which is like a similar date. It might even be the same date. So I'm already considering traveling and competing, but we will see. It's a lot. It's a lot of flights, for what I'm already planning. So don't take it personally. It just means that maybe I want to have some type of circadian rhythm, while I'm prepping. So.
There is rumor
how
that
selfish of you.
I'm a fast person.
Right. Yeah. I was just gonna say that if it convinces you, there is rumor that Berto might be there as well. So we might have kind of pushed him anyway. So
Well, Berto is not competing this year. That I know.
correct. Yeah. We couldn't
He's got some
convince that for
3D
sure.
MJ 3D MJ rosters that he was inquiring about when I was looking for the date. So I said
So you could be physically there. I see.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, 3D MJ mic drop at the inaugural event. Be a party.
We'll meet up.
I'm definitely considering it, because it's a potential for sure, and I appreciate that offer.
Sweet. All right. Before we go, maybe some words of wisdom if someone's watching this as a first-time competitor. Obviously, you've got plenty of experience. What is maybe, as a coach, as an experienced athlete, kind of 1 or 2, 3 things that they need to know? I know a lot of my clients are probably going to be watching this, and they're anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks out from a lot of their first shows for the spring. What do they need to know for these next couple weeks?
Number 1 is, don't try to focus on bodybuilding any more than is necessary to get an optimal outcome from your diet. Spending all of your time on forums, I'm dating myself, or on social media looking for the greener approach, or what could I do to be losing fat faster or retain more muscle, or etc., is just going to create an unhealthy obsession that might actually make you look worse. Live your life to some degree. Get your nutrition in order, get your training in order, get your recovery in order. 2, practice your posing, which I'll talk about in a second, and then it'll take care of itself and you'll be in shape. So number 2 is start practicing your posing earlier rather than later. Don't underestimate the impact it can have on performance. I have, in the way I got my INBA pro card back in the day, and the way I have placed decently well for myself, there's been at least 3 times I can think of, and I'm not going to call anybody out because I don't think it's nice, where I have beaten a physique backstage that is a better physique than mine because I have posed better than them. There's also been times earlier in my career where I lost, or placed lower, I should say, than I should have because of poor posing. And it's something that I don't think you need to spend an inordinate amount of time on it, but going through the posing rounds and having that really cued in is something that I recommend people start like 6 months out at the latest, to be honest. Yeah. And then the third thing I would say is that, especially if you're a first-time competitor, I think you want to have, and this does apply after your first-time competitor, have multiple goals so that you have a lot of opportunities for success. And considering what I said earlier, that probably half to more than half of first-time competitors are not actually first-time competitors. They start prep, but they don't make it. I think the first goal in the season should be considered a success if you successfully make it to stage.
I agree.
Then after that, maybe it's represent yourself well. Show the skill of bodybuilding well, pose well on stage, make the have a decently choreographed routine, even if it's just like I go through the mandatory poses of the ones I like to music that I like, and I hold them long enough so it doesn't look like I'm just constantly moving. That's fantastic, and then be present. Don't be the person who's worried about what you're going to look like and not there and too nervous to talk to anyone backstage. It should be a good experience. Don't be so hungry and so dieted. I mean, you will be, that you're focusing on more on the meal you're going to have after you compete. Because really think about, like, what would the person who started this prep 6 months ago want to get out of this day, not the dieted person I am now.
Yeah.
And then the final thing is that have a plan and be intentional and show yourself some grace and compassion during the post-show period. First-time competitors struggle with that at least as much, if sometimes not more, than the diet itself. And I think having some plan beyond having a list of restaurants that you plan to attend, or a whole bunch of different types of candy or food that you want to eat, is probably one extreme you don't want to be at. The other extreme, having crazy expectations of basically still dieting and doing kind of an old school restrictive reverse diet where you're slowly coming out of a deficit. I think something in the middle, and I would recommend people check out our resources on the recovery diet, free resources. And I think if you do those three things, you're going to have a pretty good experience. And it's a great place to then build that foundation from for future competitions.
Amazing. Well, thank you, man.
Beautiful.
We appreciate
Yeah.
you coming on. Really, really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me,
Thank you,
guys.
Eric.
If people want to follow along, where
Yeah.
can they find, the stuff that you're posting, the YouTube, the vlogs, all that good stuff? Where do they find you?
Absolutely. YouTube.com/team3DMJ. All one word, TEAM, the number 3 DMJ. Like I said, it's like I said in the vlog, it's intermittent. So you can expect another one in like a month and a half. Maybe when I hook up with Berto, we're actually presenting in Mexico, which I'm really looking forward to in mid-April. And that's when I'm going to officially bring him on as a coach. So I think it'll be good. I might do like an interview format, like what he thinks I need to work on, how 2019 went, what we can improve upon. So it'd be good to kind of have that kind of collaborative coach-athlete discussion for the next one. And then
Sweet.
if I plan, like right now, I'm tentatively planning to do a powerlifting meet as well this year because I'm turning 40 and I can cut to the 83s because I'll be shredded. So I can be moderately relevant at the national level in powerlifting. So I might sneak in and do an M1 83 comp here, like sometime in June. And I might talk about that. Or I won't mention it all because my joints are hurt and I hurt myself. And I'm just said, I never planned to do that. What are you talking about? It's a terrible idea. So we shall see.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys
Love
for
it.
watching. If you guys enjoyed this episode, give us a like, and maybe we can bully Mr. Eric Helms to come on here again in the future and talk about the powerlifting meet that never happened and the prep that's still going.
100%.
Awesome.
There we
Thank
go.
you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.